Hi, good afternoon. My name is Dr. Kausar Ahmed, and on behalf of Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada, I welcome all of you to our very interesting session today with Dr. Oscar Palma from Colombia. And one of the reasons we invited Dr. Oscar is because Dana Martinez, our MyTech intern, who's currently doing her internship with us over the past 2 months, and although some of you might be aware of the peace treaty in Colombia with the FARC, aka FARC, but possibly Dr. Oscar is the best person to educate us what is happening behind the peace treaty that already occurred and what is coming up in the future. And we are also promoting his very latest book. And our title of the webinar is Aftermath of the Havana Peace Agreement, the FARC Security Challenges and Persistence of Violence in Colombia. So with this, I will let Dana to moderate this session. But before we really go into the next part of our session, we always do treaty recognition. The institute is based on the original lands of Anishinaabe, Cree, Ojibwe, Dakota, and Dene people, and the original lands of Métis Nation. We all are treaty people in Manitoba, and we all are promise bound to work together in the true spirit of truth and reconciliation. So, with this, let me hand over to our intern and very efficient Dana Martinez. Dana, take over. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's quick webinar series. My name is Dana Martinez, and I'm pleased to moderate today's sessions on behalf of the Conflict and Resilience Research Institute Canada. So today's webinar, as Dr. say, is the aftermath of the Havana Peace Agreement, the FARC security challenges, and the persistence of violence in Colombia. Nearly a decade after the 2016 Havana Peace Agreement, Colombia continues to face a complex post-agreement security landscape. The country is no longer dealing with the same conflict structure that existed before the agreement, but with the new forms of violence shaped by illicit economies, armed groups, adaptation, territorial control, and the limits of Paz Total or total peace. So to discussion these challenges, we are honored to welcome Dr. Oscar Palma, Associate Professor at the School of Social, Political, and International Studies at Universidad del Rosario in Colombia. His expertise in international security, armed conflict, organized crime, and Colombian security dynamics will help us better understand the persistence of violence after the agreement. So, well, in terms of format, Dr. Palma will first deliver his presentation, and after that, we will move to Q&A and discussion period. For those watching online, please submit your questions. So with that, it is my pleasure to welcome Dr. Oscar Palma. So, Dr. Oscar Palma, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation and to the Institute for the invitation as well. It's a huge pleasure for me to be here discussing Colombia, discussing the continuation of conflict. It's not easy. It's not easy what's going on in Colombia right now at this time, 10 years after signing the Havana Agreement. Violence is still there. The illicit economies are still there. So it's good to have the time and the session to discuss this kind of issues, which are very relevant for us in the hemisphere. So thank you, Dr. Ahmed, and thank you, Dana, for the invitation. It's a huge pleasure for me to be here. I'll try to be as brief as I can. It's a very complex topic. It involves many variables, many issues. So it's not easy to try and summarize all of this happening in just 30 minutes. But I'll try to do my best. I'll try to do my best, and then we can probably go more deeply into some issues on the Q&A. So thank you once again, and it's my pleasure to be here. So let's discuss what's going on in Colombia with violent actors, with violence, with illicit economies after the signature of the Havana Peace Agreement. So as I said, in 2016, there was a agreement signed between the Colombian government And the main revolutionary movement in Colombia, the Revolutionary Armed Forces of Colombia, known as FARC, and since then, the period of implementation has actually begun. So it's been 10 years, but it is unfortunate to see that this agreement hasn't led into a period of peace and conflict. So can you please go on to the next slide? So what's in the agreement? Some of you might know what the agreement is about. Some of you might not know what the agreement is about. It's a very complex agreement. It includes many dispositions. It includes 578 different dispositions. That's 578 different actions, different things that needed to be done in Colombia regarding the topics that you see in the slide at this moment. So those are the 6 points of the Havana Agreement. I don't want to go deeply into the agreement itself. We would have like a whole different discussion in terms of the agreement, and it would take like 2 or 3 sessions, Ahmed, if you want to actually discuss what the agreement is about. But I just want to refer to the agreement to understand what's going on with the armed groups currently in Colombia. So you see the 6 points there: comprehensive rule reform, political participation, end of conflict, solution to the problem of illicit drugs, agreement of victims of conflict, and implementation, verification, ratification. Those are the 6 big subjects of the agreement and the number of dispositions in each of the clauses of the agreement. The big problem here is the implementation of the agreement is really lagging behind. So if you can jump into the next slide. What you see in this slide is the level of implementation of the agreement today. This is not my, obviously not my study. This is not my graph. This is done by the Kroc Institute at the University of Notre Dame in the United States, which is one of the institutions in charge of studying the implementation of the agreement. So as a consequence of the agreement, some institutions were pointed to in order to follow the agreement, to study the implementation of the agreement, and the Kroc Institute is one of them. They have been publishing reports since the beginning of the implementation, and this is actually a graph from I believe is the 9th report of the Kroc Institute referring to the implementation as the latest of the publications in terms of the implementation of the agreement. And what you can actually see from this graph is that we still need to do a lot in terms of the implementation of the agreement to be able to reach all of the 578 dispositions created in the agreement. So if you can see in the graph, you will see that there's a small part that is complete, and there's a small part that is intermediate in terms of the application. But when you go into minimum application and not even initiated, you will find a considerable amount of dispositions that to the date, and it was published at the end of 2025, November 2025 actually, you will see that many of these dispositions have not been implemented. 35% of the dispositions of the agreement were in the minimum stage, and 8% of these positions were not even begun to be implemented. And this report actually says probably 43% of the dispositions are not going to be able to be implemented on the 5-year period that we have now for the implementation, because the agreement said it's going to take 15 years to implement, so we've got 5 years more to implement the dispositions of the agreement. That does not mean that if not implemented, the Havana Agreement is going to go through the garbage. Some things will have to happen in Congress, in the presidency, etc., to go back and to retake the spirit of the agreement. But the state it is now is not really looking good. There's 2 specific indicators in terms of gender approach and ethnic approach that you can see there in the graph as well. These dispositions, as you can see, gender approach, 52% were by 2025 in minimum implementation. And if you can see ethnic approach as well, 61% were in minimum implementation, with a 9% not even being implemented, with 13% of the gender approach not even begun yet by 2025. As I said, I'm not going to go deeply into details of the agreement. I just wanted to point out the fact that we haven't advanced on the implementation of the agreement is an opportunity for armed groups to grow. The illicit economies, particularly cocaine, is growing, has grown from the last 5, 10 years, basically because we haven't been able to thoroughly implement the agreement itself. So the lack of implementation implies the possibility for armed groups to actually grow, to significantly grow. And this is what is taking us to the situation in which we are right now in Colombia with all these different groups. So let me jump now into the armed groups. So if you can actually jump into the next slide. Uh, if you can, oh, the crows are there. If maybe you can go back one, just go back and back again. No, it's fine, no worries. Go back to the next one. Not this one, but the next one. And the next one. There you go, yeah. Well, what you see there, it's some symbols of different insurgent groups that emerged through the different decades in the 1960s, in the 1970s, in the 1990s, and the 1990s. In the 1960s, and behind those crosses, you will see the symbol of the Revolutionary Forces of Colombia, of the ELN, and another movement that is called the EPL. These movements of a Marxist-Leninist kind of vibe were created in the 60s, and they evolved through the 70s, through the 80s, through the 90s. And you will see that from the rest of the decades, some other movements actually arise as well. In the 1970s, you've got the emergence of the M19, which is a different movement. It's not necessarily a peasant-based Marxist-Leninist groups like you had in the 1960s with FARC and the ELN. It's more of Bolivarianist movements that grew from urban educated people. It's not necessarily the peasant-based massive movements that you have on the countryside. It's more this kind of urban people from universities, student movement, student-based movement, workers movement in the 1970s. In the 1980s, you will see the emergence of two more movements. One of them, the second one there, is the Movimiento Quintín Lame, which is an indigenous-based movement. So it acts in a very specific part of the country in the north of the Cauca region, which is one of the regions here in Colombia. It's motivated by Indian communities, more specifically the ones in the north of Cauca, and even fighting sometimes with other insurgencies that were trying to grasp the territory right there in their own regions. And in the 1990s, you will see a reactionary movement. It's called Autodefensas Unidas de Colombia, AUC. It's not a left-wing insurgency. It's actually a reactionary movement against insurgency. So you will see that several of these insurgencies emerged through different decades, and through all of the same decades as well, you will see some reactionary movements being created in different regions defending against insurgencies, basically because the state was very weak and they didn't have any presence in the region. So the people just say, let's just take arms against the insurgencies. They created all these reactionary groups. By the 1990s, they configured this big coalition, this big confederation of groups, which was known as Autodefensas Unidas de Colombia, self-defense forces, also known as paramilitary units, as paramilitary forces. Basically because they had, some of them had some connections with the military in the sense that they were fighting left-wing insurgencies. They had the same enemy, so they came together and they fight against these insurgent movements through the 1990s. Now, the crosses that you see there, they were supposed to come up in different times, but that's specifically because in the 1990s, you will have a massive peace agreement in Colombia through which all the movements that you see under a blue cross demobilized. They said, we're signing a peace agreement at the end of the 1990s. It was a big moment in Colombia, massive peace agreement, new constitution. So some of these movements decided, okay, we're leaving ours behind. We're creating political parties. So we're now joining the peace. So that happened at the end of the 1990s. Then under the Yellow Cross, you see a demobilization that happened in 2004, which is the demobilization of the paramilitary or the self-defense forces that happened in negotiations with the government of Álvaro Uribe Vélez in 2004. So that movement disappeared as well. And then under the Red Cross, you see the FARC, the main insurgency guerrilla movement, which demobilized in 2016, precisely with the Havana Agreement. So it's different times at which these different movements have actually signed peace agreements and joined peace and society, and they have tried to implement different entrepreneur companies, and they have joined all these different initiatives that you can find for them to actually join society peacefully. The point is, one could think that with the demobilization of all of these groups, we finally see the conflict is moving away and conflict is actually disappearing. And unfortunately, no. You can see there's one movement there that is not under cross. It's the ELN, the National Liberation Army, ELN. It remains today as one of the most active and most violent groups in Colombia. So they didn't sign a peace agreement. They haven't signed any peace agreement at all. And they were sit with government through years, through all these decades. They have been in several negotiations, but they haven't yet signed a peace agreement. So they continue to be one of the active movements. But unfortunately, the demobilization of FARC and the demobilization of the AUC, the paramilitary, many of the members of these groups didn't really demobilize. They decided to continue in war, and they created new groups. And these new groups have actually grown through the decades, through the years. For 10 years, they have grown, not necessarily bringing back people who were already in conflict. By recruiting new members, by recruiting new fighters, they have managed to grow in the last years. And we're going to see how they have managed to actually grow. But that is the panorama. I just wanted to take you back to where are these people actually coming from, where are these groups actually coming from. So from the demobilization, once again, of FARC and the AUC, we have the emergence of new groups. Now, which are these new groups? And which are the active groups that we see now in Colombia? If you can jump into the next slide, please. The FARC, the demobilization of FARC, led several minor groups on the territory. I was telling you before, some people decided we're not signing Havana Agreement. We don't agree with this. We don't trust the state. We are going to continue fighting. We're going to continue in war. And some of the main people that were in war are those two leaders that you see there in the upper right hand side of the slide. You see Gentil Duarte and you see Iván Mordisco. So these are leaders of several fronts in FARC, in former FARC, which were front number 1 and front number 7. FARC was organized in blocks and fronts. So you will see that they were recognized by a number of fronts 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, etc. And the blocks have different logic geographical as well, the North Front, the Eastern Front, etc. The Eastern Bloc, the North Bloc, Caribbean Bloc, etc. So some of those fronts say, we're not fighting, we're not signing the agreement. We're fighting, and as once again I point to those leaders, Gentil Duarte, Iván Mordisco, they decided we're remaining in war. So they grew, they emerged as what we call in Colombia FARC's dissidences. So dissident groups that decided to actually stay in war. And what you will see from then on, it's a big evolution of these groups into major, bigger coalitions and bigger groups than we have at the original moment in 2016. So after 2016, some of these fronts actually decided to align with this emerging block that you have with Gentil Duarte and Ivan Mordisco. The map is in Spanish, sorry, but you can see that you will have some fronts that have decided to join Gentil Duarte. You can see there ex-FARC con Gentil Duarte. Those are several of those fronts that decided to join Gentil Duarte and people of the First Front into this new massive coalition. But the story does not end up there, because you've got other leadership. And in the picture down there, you will see El Paisa, Ivan Marquez, Jesus Santrich. These are different leaders from FARC that at some point decided to quit the process and go back to war. For example, Ivan Marquez, the person that you see in the photo there with glasses that has the documents in his hand with a green uniform, he was supposed to be a congressman of FARC. When the Havana Agreement was signed, there were some seats in Congress created for them, and he was supposed to join. He was supposed to be a congressman, and at some point he said, "I'm quitting this. I'm not continuing this Havana Agreement. I'm going back to war." For many reasons, he's not trusting the state. He thinks the state's not going to fulfill. There's also the incentive of obviously of the illicit economies, particularly the cocaine economy. So they decided, we're separating from the group. We're creating a new armed group that is going to be called Segunda Marquetalia. So you can see that once again in the graph, you see some ex-FARC con Ivan Marquez, front 18, front 28, front 32. So these people decide, okay, we're joining Ivan Marquez, we're following Ivan Marquez into a new group. And then we have two massive coalitions of groups that are not necessarily, monolithic hierarchical groups, pretty well defined, like FARC used to be and the ELN used to be. They're more like coalitions of different groups coming together. So you will see once again, Gentil Duarte and Mordisco, and they will create a new group. We'll see the names a bit ahead. Estado Mayor Central, and then you will have Segunda Marquetalia with Mr. Ivan Marquez, El Paisa, Jesus Santrich, etc. So it's like two massive coalitions of different fronts and that grew from Havana Agreement. If you can jump into the next slide, please. So what you see, and this is where it gets complex, from emerging from the Havana, from 2016 Havana, is not just two groups, and it's not two very defined hierarchical monolithical groups. It's more a system. And this system is a system where you can find different types of violent actors. So it's not just Segunda Marquetalia and Estado Mayor Central, these new groups emerging. It's a whole system, a system that includes different types of actors. Which are these actors? And those are the actors that I have in this graph. Once again, it's in Spanish, I'm sorry about that, but I believe that you can actually translate it easily. It's not a problem, it shouldn't be a problem. You've got Grupos Armados Organizados. In Colombia, we know them as GAOs, G-A-Os. These are the most prominent, the major, the stronger armed groups, the organized armed groups, which they threaten the state, they threaten national security. To some extent, they control territory. They submit the population by force. They have a significant, weapons capacity, man capacity, etc. You also have, it says there, Grupos Delincuenciales Organizados. We know them in Colombia as GDOs. These are not necessarily as strong as the prominent armed groups. They're smaller. They're more dedicated to criminal activities, to delinquential activities. So they don't necessarily have the power to threaten the military forces, to threaten the state. They're smaller in terms of manpower, but they do generate violence. They work for the illicit economies, and sometimes they're even hired by the prominent Grupos Armados Organizados to perform some sort of activity. So they're part of this system, of this whole system emerging from 2016. You also have, it says there, empresas de servicios. Take them as outsourcing companies that can be hired by all of them to do some specific duties. So, for example, if you want to charge extortion to some people, if you want to, I don't know, kidnap someone, you do not necessarily need to do this by yourself. You might hire someone to actually do that for you. So you pay them, and they will receive some money. They're part of this illicit economy, this massive illicit economy. But you're contributing as well to violence through your activities. So it's part of the whole system. And you've got some people there. It's invisibles. You can see that. Oh, this works in English as well. It's invisibles. People you can actually see. The invisibles. This is not a label that I used, but it was labeled proposed by Inside Crime, which is a good source when you want to find out about criminal activity in Latin America mainly. It's reporters all in Latin America publishing news on the groups on illicit economies. They're really good. They do really good job. They're using this name, this label, Invisibles, to identify this new kind of drug dealer that is not as visible as, I don't know, Pablo Escobar. Everyone knows Pablo Escobar in the world. Everyone knows who Pablo Escobar is. He was a massive drug dealer. He had huge amount of power, huge amount of money. He threatened security. He put bombs everywhere. We don't have today this kind of drug dealers. We have smaller drug dealers with a smaller share of the market, uh, pretty well educated. They might have gone to universities in the US and trained in law and trained in finances and trained in business. Uh, and they're not as evident, they're not as visible as Pablo Escobar was. So they might live in Miami, in Barcelona, in Madrid, in Bogota, in Medellin, wherever they want to live, pretty much hidden in society without the state knowing who they are. But they're part of the system. They're part of the system because they contribute to the illicit economy. So they're part of this whole system emerging to 2016. But the most important characteristic of this system I'm telling you about is that this is a very flexible and adaptable system. The system is constantly in flux, is constantly evolving. You can target one group and you can think, I'm going to target this group, I'm going to weaken this group, I'm going to target the head of this group. That does not mean that the group disappears. It means that the networks are going to adapt to the new scenario in order for the activity to continue happening. So this is what I'm saying. It's constantly adapting. It's in flux. It's in constant flux. It's all time moving, adapting, and that makes it more difficult from the public policy standpoint to actually, face the groups and the people that are there. So you can find, and I will show you now some examples of how you can target some groups, but that does not mean the end of the activity. It only means the reaccommodation into other structures, into newer groups that will actually show you what it is. I'm having some problems here. I don't know if I'm still connected to you. What's going on here? Can you hear me?
You are good, Dr. Oscar. You're
You're
good.
good. No worry. Yeah.
However, my screen is absolutely blank. I can't see anything. Oh wow. Ooh, this is quite a problem. What should
You
I
are,
do?
Dr. Oscar, you are on the slide GAO's GDO.
Wait, I'm back. Good, fantastic.
Okay.
Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry about that. Good,
Yeah, you're
great,
back.
great,
Great.
cool. So yeah, I was telling you, it's constantly adapting, it's constantly changing. You've got new groups emerging. You can target people, and it doesn't matter. It will reaccommodate. So I'm going to show you some examples of this, how it's happening. So if you can actually jump into the next slide. So I'm just showing some examples of this fluidity. It's not all of the examples. You will find many more. And these examples are from 2020. So it's right after signing the agreement, 4 years later, but already 6 years before today, because this is the kind of dynamic that you will see happening from there all the way now. Different examples you can see there. Let me just see the first one. You can see that it says Bloque Centaurus. Bloque Centaurus was a former paramilitary self-defense unit. I was telling you about how this how through the country you've got people taking arms against the insurgency, basically because the state was not able to fight them. So they come up together with these groups, and one of them is actually Bloques Centauros. So Bloques Centauros joined the AUC, Autodefensas Unidas de Colombia, which is the kind of umbrella organization of paramilitary units. And they demobilized in 2004, but they didn't disappear. A different kind of groups emerged from this demobilization, and one of them very prominent today are called Urabeños. I will talk about them a bit ahead. Urabeños, basically because they operate mainly in a region that is called Urabá, in the Pacific Northwest and the kind of the northwest Colombia border with Colombia, border with Panama. And Urabeños itself was kind of an umbrella for other minor groups. One of those minor groups was this other group that you see there. It's called Caparros. So Caparros was part of the umbrella of Urabeños, and they operated together and they did business together and everything. But at some point, Caparros decided, I'm breaking up with Urabeños because I can make more money if I'm just go by myself. I can find more money in the illicit economy, and they started fighting Urabeños. So they used to be part of this, and they used to be part of AUC. They used to be part of bigger structures before, but they didn't disappear because of demobilization of the AUC. They continued existing, and they even fight their other allies. So it's one example of how these things are constantly changing. Caparros today, they don't exist. The state offensive, the fight with all groups, they seriously diminished Caparros to the point in which their members, the remaining members, actually joined other groups from all the massive amount of groups that you can see today in the Colombian conflict. Another example that you see down there, it's the CCO that you can see there right in the middle of the second blocks. The CCO, it's the Coordinadora de Occidente. Coordinadora, it's like a coordinated from the West. Comando Coordinador de Occidente, which emerged in 2016 as different members from different fronts from FARC decided to stay in war. So you can see people there from, that's why I have F6, F30 over there that you can see. F6 is front 6, front 30. Down there you can see something that says C. Miller Perdomo, that's Columna Miller Perdomo, it's a specialized unit from FARC. And then you can see another front there, it's called Jacobo Arenas. So people from these different fronts of FARC decided we're not signing Havana, we are getting into something called Comando Coordinador de Occidente. And this Comando Coordinador de Occidente includes different new kind of units that today have joined into a new organization that is part of something bigger, that is the Estado Mayor Central. So it's, and most of these leaders have been targeted by the state. You know, the state comes in, they capture them, they kill them, they neutralize them, they do whatever with him, and that doesn't mean the end. It's not like people in weapons, they just go home and say, okay, we lost the war. No, they just find the opportunities to actually, how do we continue this? So that evolves into new groups and new groups and new groups. I'm not going to go into the rest of the examples because we don't have a lot of time, but just to point that we've got fluidity all the time. So you can jump into the next slide, please, Dana. So today, 2026, what we have is this. Taking account into that fluidity, right? So we've got VLN, I already talked about that group. So it's the prominent insurgency from the 1960s. They haven't demobilized, they haven't signed a peace agreement. So it is still there. It still exists. It is a Grupo Armado Organizado. It is one of those massive ones with big categories that they can threaten the state, etc., etc. Now, in FARC, you have two major coalitions. You've got the Estado Mayor Central, the EMC, which was originally led by those two leaders I showed you in the pictures before. And you've got the Segunda Marquetalia there as well. You can see the symbol there of Segunda Marquetalia, which is once again the other coalition that was created by Iván Márquez and other people, prominent leaders in FARC. Then next to it, you can see another symbol that is EGC. That's called the Ejército Gaitanista de Colombia. This is an evolution, or it's actually the same Urabeños I was talking to you before. So Urabeños have different names. We know them as Clan del Golfo, we know them as Urabeños, and they have used the name Ejército Gaitanista de Colombia. Uh, Gaitanista means the person that you see there in the kind of the badge is a former politician, a prominent politician in Colombia named Jorge Eliezer Gaitan. He was murdered in 1948. This is way back. It goes back to political history of Colombia, but they're using him as a figure, trying to say we are not only criminals, we are actually a proper insurgency. We fight for the people, etc., etc., etc. That is up to debate. They're pretty much focused on crime and cocaine, etc. But they're trying to portray themselves as we're kind of this other insurgency. So that's also there. It is one of the big GAOs. And then we've got the Autodefensas Cazadoras de la Sierra Nevada, which is the next one that you can see there. The ACSN, that little shield that you see there. This is also an evolution of people demobilizing from the AUC, from the paramilitary right-wing kind of units that you had before. So there used to be something called Bloque Tayrona, which was units operating in a precise region of Colombia in the north. They joined some militias and then they created this new group that was pretty much criminal. And they are trying to use this name once again, Autodefensas Cazadoras, in also kind of portraying themselves as there's a political objective behind it. It's not just criminality. We're not just trafficking cocaine, but it is pretty much trafficking cocaine. But they try to portray themselves as we're kind of an army, yes, we're kind of self-defending here, and all this kind of discourses that will try to put you as something political. And now you have something down there. You can see three other shields, three other coats of arms down there as well. These are dissidences from all of these groups. So all of these groups are dissidences, but now you can see the dissidences of the dissidences, which is it's crazy. It gets to the point when it's difficult to keep up with all the little groups that you can find in Colombia. This other dissidents and this guy and this guy and this have come together into this new group. It's really difficult to keep up. So Estado Mayor Central and Segunda Marquetalia were in negotiations with the government. And at some point, those negotiations broke. Some of these units say, we want to continue negotiations. So they created kind of their own little dissidents, their own little group. I'm saying little, but they're not little, they're quite powerful as well. So you can see that from Estado Mayor Central, you have these other dissidents called the Estado Mayor de Frentes y Bloques. And from Segunda Marquetalia, you've got the Coordinadora Nacional Ejército Bolivariano. These are the two insurgencies. They are occupying territory. They're acting in different regions of the country. They're separate from the other ones, and they're even fighting the other ones, and they have also become powerful. Same as with the ELN. The ELN, you can see that there's another one down there that says Frente Comuneros del Sur, FCS. That is a specific unit operating in the south, in Colombia, after negotiations broke out with the ELN. They said, we want to continue negotiating. And they are actually in a negotiation process with them. From all of these groups, Paz Total, the kind of peace initiative by this current government, they open negotiations with all of these groups. Today, the only ones kind of really working are the ones with the Frente Comuneros del Sur and the one with the Coordinadora Nacional Ejército Bolivariano. Two of these negotiations from the rest of the negotiations are actually kind of working. The rest of them failed. They failed for many reasons. We can also have another session discussing on why they failed, etc. But the truth is, today, we've got all of these armed groups operating in the country, and the government, the current government, is actually leading in 15 days, in 7 new governments actually going to come to Colombia. Different governments. We don't know if this negotiation process are actually going to continue, are actually going to be implemented per se. Can we jump into the next slide? And I want to very quickly go into a closing, just to show you that the cocaine economy is growing in Colombia significantly through the last years. If you go to the second graph, you can see the number of hectares and the metric tons of cocaine that have been produced in the last years. And you can see the curves there. You can see the years behind them. From pretty much 2013 until today, there's a significant growth of cocaine and the production of cocaine in Colombia. So this is the context, in which these new groups actually flourish. There's a lot of cocaine flowing out from Colombia, and these illicit economies obviously help these new groups to flourish wherever they want to go. If we can jump into the next one, please, as well, and the next one as well. There you go. So the statistics on how these groups have actually grown in the last year. This is just the numbers from 2024 to 2025. So you can see that there's 27,121 new members in all of these groups. And you can see the little percentages of all of these groups and the territory they occupy along Colombia. So you can see that Clan del Golfo, which once again is Urabeños, or also known as Ejército Gaitanista de Colombia, they have grown 30% in the last year, with incrementing, adding up 9,000 combatants to the group. That's a lot of combatants. So if you look at the numbers of all of these groups, VLN, DMC, Comunero del Sur, all of them have actually grown in the last year, to the point where we now once again have 27,121 members in all of these new groups. So this is unfortunately the strategic scenario that Colombia is facing now. All of these groups, once again, with all this fluidity, all this flexibility, in the context of illicit economies growing, it's really, really challenging for us. I will just show the next one, please. Just some key points. I'm not going to go into this. I just want you to have them there so that you can show them there, so that if you watch the video, maybe you can go point for point. But these are some of the key points that we can actually see from the context we have now, from our groups and from negotiations, and some kind of conclusion that you can see from what's going on. But there's many questions open, taking into account that the next government is pretty much opposed to the idea of negotiating. So we will see. We will see how this comes up after this new government it's coming in. So yeah, I'll just leave the key points there so the people can actually read them whenever they want to read them, and I'll just quit it there because I already used a lot of time. So I'm sorry about that, but thank you, Dana, and thank you once again, Kauser, for the invitation, for letting me talk about this.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So now we are going to Q&A questions. So first, Dr. Ahmed, if you have some questions for Dr. Scalpalma, go ahead. So
Thank you so much, Dr. Oscar. I mean, it's such a brilliant presentation. It was a very captivating one, I would rather say, and possibly due to my sheer ignorance about the conflict itself, it was such an interesting discussion. And I think, audience, you might agree with me that Dr. Oscar is not only an expert on this topic, but also he's a beautiful, I would say, very skillful, delivery of the presentation, so that we understood the evolution of these groups and how it stands as on today. Although a little bleak picture for many of us, we thought that Colombia has become more peaceful after the peace treaty, especially Havana peace treaty of 16. Nonetheless, I think we need to invite Dr. Oscar for another one or two sessions kindly, to give us more broader historical perspective, because Um,
Definitely.
and intentionally, I'm not going into typical Q&A because it is such a broad and very complex topic, and one session will not do justice. So, on behalf of the institute, let me formally request Dr. Oscar to kindly consider another 2 or 3 sessions with us so that we have a solid understanding of the peace treaty and its lack of implementation, because that is how the presentation today started. But maybe one quick question, Dr. Oscar, for you to kindly respond is that we understand the motivation of money through the drug dealings and illicit economy. But is there any political ambitions of these groups as they evolved? What is the political ideology? Of course, one group you have said, pretty left oriented, but over these years, what do you see? Is it the lack of political ideological background that they are all succumb to these illicit economy? And eventually, I mean, the question is, what do they want to achieve politically?
Fantastic. Thank you very much for your kind words, Kazra, on terms of the presentation. It's not easy to try to put all of this content in 30, 40 minutes. It's such a complex country, such a complex conflict. Ranging from years and regions and decades. It's Yeah, you could have like a proper masters on just the Colombian case. So thank you very much for your kind words, and yeah, I'll be pleased to be back here and talk about like these different aspects of the conflict as well. Uh, in terms of your question, it is currently a debate in Colombia to what extent these groups are actually political, to what extent we can understand them as political actors, and to what extent they're just criminals. Um, and it's not easy to just say, you know, uh, very clearly, this is 100% criminal, this is 100% political. You've got like all of these weird combinations of political motivations, actions, and criminologists have actually come up with very good concepts to kind of capture that kind of difficult organizations in the middle, hybrid groups and commercial insurgencies and criminal insurgencies, all of these different concepts that try to capture these organizations in the middle. That said, when you think about the FARC's dissidences, FARC's dissident groups, Segunda Marquetalia, Estado Mayor Central, and the groups that have actually originated from them, they will claim that they have a real political objective, and it's basically the agenda that FARC was created with. They are upholding that kind of agenda today. Like FARC disappeared, and FARC had an agenda, once again, Marxist Leninist, but it was pretty much in terms of the rights of peasants, the rights of workers that are marginalized in the countryside. Colombia is a very centralized country. It's a country of political elites. We cannot deny that. So that you can see that representation in further regions. It's scarce. So they came up in the 1960s with these agendas and this flag saying we bear this the idea of rights of peasants, communities of minorities in the countryside. So these groups will tell you today that they have this kind of agenda as well. That they're pursuing this kind of objectives. And if you look at the leaders of some of these groups, like for example, Ivan Marquez, at the leaders of the old First Front, of the Seventh Front, you will see that there are people that have actually they actually fought for, I don't know, decades in FARC, in the original FARC. Calarca, which is one of the leaders of one of those dissidences, he was in FARC when he was 16 or 15. So all of his life, he's dedicated to, this kind of struggle. So if you want to find something resembling political objectives, you might find it in those very leaderships of the traditional insurgencies that evolve into these dissidences that we have now. But then you find the kind of geographies and the motivation of geographies, and you will find that the coca economies pretty much explains what they do and where they are deploying and the activities they do. So it's very difficult to justify that they're entirely political. There might be a gist of it at some point somewhere, but it's very difficult to categorize the whole group, as having a political ideology, as having a political identity. That said, I would believe that if there is still something of a political objective in these groups, is not the idea of taking over national power. FARC had a whole strategy devised to take power in Bogota and to take the presidency and to implement a new government, kind of like, I don't know, the Mao Zedong insurgency in China, etc. Or kind of that idea of we're going to power. These groups don't have that. They are probably more dedicated to controlling territory locally. So kind of criminal governance activities, they capturing rents from all the activities that you can find in one single region, in those regions where they operate. There you can find some ideas of what their objectives are in political terms. Once again, the debate is big in Colombia today.
Thank you so much, Dr. Oscar. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
Also, I have a question for you, and
Go
I'm
ahead.
pretty curious about it. It's that, well, one of the key tensions in Colombia today seems to be that the peace and security are often treated as competitive approaches, either negotiation or military pressure. So, but after nearly a decade of the Havana Agreement, the security environment is no longer organized around, as you said, one centralized insurgent actor. Instead, we see like a fragmented army landscape where FARC, dissident factions, the ELN, Clan del Golfo, and other structures compete and cooperate, subcontract violence, and govern territory through coercion, illicit taxation, and control of mobility. And also, at the same time, Petro's Paz Total has shown both the value and the limits of dialogue, with the negotiations are not accompanied by clear objectives, territorial control, and civilian protection. So if a new administration now, the Las Priella administration, moves toward hardline security approach, especially in areas such as Norte del Santander and the Venezuela border, how can Colombia build a security doctrine that combines negotiation, military pressure, implementation of the 2016 agreement, and protection of communities without falling back into a purely militarizing logic of war?
Thank you, Dana, for the question. This is such an interesting debate that we are having now in Colombia, and it goes down to the political, to politics itself, to fighting for the electorate, to convincing minds and why you need to vote for me, etc. I think that the presidential campaign that we just went through elections, and we had like a 1 year, 2 year long campaign of narratives and discourses telling you that we need to do this, we need to do that. And as a consequence of this, we can see this dichotomy that Dana is actually trying to explain. It is true. People now are conceiving that you have either the possibility to negotiate with groups or the possibility to fight groups. So if you voted for this candidate, then it means that you were supporting negotiations. And if you voted for this candidate, it meant that you are voting for war, the re-engaging in war. And some people say, no, we're going back to war. This is terrible. Once again, war in Colombia. And it's not necessarily like this. It shouldn't be like this. It shouldn't be like this. I don't believe that security and peace are a dichotomy. I think they complement each other. I think that you need security in order to achieve peace. I think that peace doesn't make any sense if you don't have security. And this might be unpopular to say in terms of electoral politics. It's difficult to have a political program trying to explain how these two things engage together when you've got electoral politics happening on TikTok, where you just apply to the feelings of the people. So you say, we need to go back and kill everyone. Some people will say yes, and then the other side will say no, we don't want war. We just need to go back and sit with them and talk. So it's in this kind of political climate, it's very difficult to come up with organized programs that people are actually security programs that people are actually going to read and actually going to delve into it. But I do think that the two things once again mix up well. So because of the point we are right now in terms of armed groups, I think that we need to have a strong capacities in the military force and the police forces and fight some of the elements of these groups. Does this mean that we need to reduce all of them and capture everyone and kill everyone? No. But we need to show the groups that they do not have any options, that they cannot achieve any objectives through arms, through weapons. And that's when peace comes in. You need to have peace discussions, yes, but you cannot have negotiations just for the sake of negotiations. You need to sit when there's a will to lift weapons, to quit weapons, and that is not going to happen if the groups don't feel in a weaker position. If the groups feel that today they're strong and they have a lot of money from the illicit economies and they can grow more, they're not sincerely going to sit and negotiate peace. Communities in specific regions, you mentioned Norte Santander, Catatumbo, Nariño in the south, Buenaventura, the Pacific. Some communities there are really facing complicated situations because of the armed groups. So the state needs to come in, needs to recover the strength in the territories and the presence in the territories and the sympathy of communities. If that doesn't happen, we're not going to have peace. So there's once again in the electoral debate, some candidates have actually produced some documents saying we need these two things together. We need to increase security in order to have peace. And there's some specific, proposals of negotiations, yes, but if negotiations, if some of these conditions are actually fulfilled. So we need to have red lines. We need to have a period of negotiation. We need to sit down and conclude what's the objective. We need to say, this is my red line. This is my red line. That didn't happen, unfortunately, during Paz Total. So if this happens, then yes, negotiations. So yes, I think that it is possible to bring together security and peace into one whole thing in order to produce something for the future.
Thank you very much for response to your questions. We would like to have more time for questions, but I hope we can meet in another webinar to further clarify the topics we covered today, especially because, as you say, this topic it's huge and you can like talk about it just in even in an hour you can talk about it. So but thank you very much for joining us today.
Okay,
Dr.
Jana,
Oscar.
before you formally conclude, I just wanted to jump in very quickly because Dr. Oscar is such a prolific speaker because you do remind me something, Dr. Oscar, and I will possibly reach out to you separately by email because our institute, we study the conflict in Myanmar pretty intensely. And it's such a weird connection. I was thinking when you were talking about security and peace, the dichotomy, and rather it complements. And we do see a very close resemblance of the ethnic armed groups. I mean, in their Myanmar, they call themselves ethnic armed groups, but the connection of illicit economy, the money, the drugs, so these are absolutely similar, very similar. And Myanmar peace treaty sponsored by the military government for over the years, and one is also from NLD, has not gone anywhere else because the same problem that you have described is present in Myanmar conflict. So maybe another day discussion, but I'm going to invite you really to explain and see if you can help us, guide us in terms of understanding and mapping the conflict the way you beautifully presented today in a next session maybe. So once again from the institute, thank you so much for being with us. Dana, you may conclude.
Yeah, well, thank you very much, Dr. Palma, for you thoughtful responses and for sharing your expertise with us today. And we'll also like to thank you, Dr. Kauser and the Creek team for organizing this webinar. Today's discussions reminded us that, well, peace agreements are not only about ending formal armed confrontation, they also require long-term implementation, territorial governances, civilian protections, institutional presence, and economy alternatives for communities affected by this conflict. The Colombian case continues to offer important lessons for scholars, policymakers, practitioners, and students as me interested in peace building, organized crime, security governance, and post-conflict and transition. So thank you again for being part of the Creek webinar series. Now we invite you to follow Creek's website and social media channels for updates on future events and publications. So thank you very much and have a wonderful day.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation to you, Dana. Thank you, Kauser. Looking forward to your emails. That Myanmar
Thank you.
comparison is very interesting, and definitely keep in touch. Thank you very
thank
much.
thank you,
Love
sir.
the space.
Bye bye.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.